Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi, and welcome to Self-Improvement Atlas, the Personal Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm Marie Stella, your host from Melbourne, Australia. Let's start the show.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Personal Science Podcast. I'm your host, Joanna, and today I will be taking over from Marie. So on today's topic, we are going to be exploring the link between mental and physical health. Our guest today is Jarryd Heasman. Jarryd is a health and wellness consultant. And hi, Jarryd. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Joanna. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I'd love if you could tell us a bit more about yourself and what it is you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've recently made a career pivot from sports science in elite sport, specifically at the West Coast Eagles Football Club, into a corporate health and wellbeing consulting role. At the moment, that's predominantly based around the mining industry with a company called Sano Health, and then also within the transport industry. In terms of what that entails, I'm on site once a month with Sano Health, and then also doing some research projects and coordinating student practicums and some research projects in the Perth office as well. And then in terms of transport, so I'm looking at some fatigue management and sleep hygiene research projects in that space as well.
Yeah, awesome. And what made you want to make the switch from sport into what you do now?
I think it started during the COVID period for me. I did a lot of reflecting during that period. So with my role at West Coast, the majority of us got stood down during that period, like a lot of people in different industries. And yeah, I kind of reflected on what I've been working in elite sport for well over 10 years at that point in time. And I started to have a think around, well, if I wanted to do something else, what would that look like? And I was doing a lot of personal development in that period and also reading a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we'll cover it later, but like one of the main books I read during that period was Ikigai.
Oh, yeah.
Really good book. And probably the main thing I took out of that was the actual template, which is on the back of the book, where you kind of go through, or you can go through it as an exercise, right? What do you love? What are you good at? You know, what's the world need and what can you get paid for? And looking at the intersecting components of each of those areas. So it's essentially looking at like finding your inner purpose in life. The actual book itself is kind of related to, you know, longevity and focused on one of the blue zones actually in Okinawa in Japan and what differentiates them in terms of their extended lifespan and health span compared to most regions in the world. But yeah, a key part of that is finding your inner purpose, and going through the actual exercise with that Ikigai template is one way of doing that in terms of being able to really clearly identify for yourself what do you see as something that could be your inner purpose.
Yeah, awesome. And I think that leads perfectly into our next little section, which is our Have You Met? So we just get to know you with some questions. And one of the questions is there a book that you really love or one you could say that's your favorite? So would that one make the list?
That would make the list. I've probably read 4 in the last few years that have really resonated with me.
Yeah.
That's one. Why We Sleep by Matt Walker's another. Another one's Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia. And another one, which I read again like a couple of years ago, is called The 4 Agreements. So I went to a health and wellbeing retreat in Thailand for a couple of weeks as one of my holidays a few years ago.
Yeah.
When I was at a bit of a low point in terms of energy levels, stress, and how I was feeling at the time. And as part of that experience, I actually had some sessions like with a monk. So one of his key recommendations was to read that book, which I'd never heard of, but it kind of goes through different mantras to live by in terms of, maximizing your physical and mental health and minimizing stress levels.
Oh, wow. That sounds really interesting. Do you remember any of the mantras?
Yeah, I do. So how much detail you want to go through? There was a few. So don't take things personally was one. So often things are a projection of others. So don't take anything too personally from others. Don't make assumptions was another. Right, seek first to understand. Probably one of the main ones that really resonated there was like be impeccable with your word. So don't speak against yourself, put yourself down, and then also it kind of reflects how you communicate with others as well in terms of not putting others down and not spreading emotional poison, and generally just do your best. So those 4 things: be impeccable with your word, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, seek first to understand, and do your best.
Yeah, I love those. And I've definitely just jotted down that book recommendation. So I'll definitely be checking that out. Thanks for that.
No.
Moving on to our next few questions. Is there a film that you've recently watched that you've enjoyed?
I probably watch less and less films with the time commitment. But the
Yeah.
one that I've watched most recently of the movies is June. So I catch up with a mate of mine semi-regularly, and one of the main things that we do, so he's in health and wellbeing space as well, with a company called Telethon Kids. So we catch up, have a chat about how we're going, have a chat about health and wellbeing, sport normally, and some research projects that we're looking into. And then often, like we finish that, we go and watch a movie together, both Marvel nerds back in the day as well. So watched quite a few Marvel movies over the journey as well. But June's the most recent movie that I've watched.
Awesome. And I've heard good things about June. Did you enjoy it?
I did, because I'd read the book as well.
Yeah.
No, it was really good. Highly recommended. So I'd seen, obviously that was the second one. So I'd seen both of them. Highly recommended.
Great. Yeah, I do know they're long watches though. They're about like 3 hours long.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, no, but worth it.
Amazing. Well, I'll definitely have to check that one out as well. Last couple questions here. Is there a podcast you listen to, or are you a podcast listener?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, so during COVID, like really started listening to quite a lot of podcasts. The regulars are Human Lab, so that'd be really widely listened to, I'm sure. So that's one major one. But one thing I've discovered recently is an app called Snip. So you can kind of listen to the app as you're driving, for example, and you press a button and it snips that particular part of the podcast. So the human podcasts are really, really good, but they're very information dense. There's heaps of info in there. But if I want to clip a certain part of it and go back to it for later, you can use this app and it'll store that part in the podcast and then what he was talking about. And then you can kind of go back and summarize that and put it into your notes or however you want to use it. So that's definitely one that I listen to regularly. Another one's Diary of a CEO, slightly different, but again, like widely listened to. Yeah. One that's probably a little less listened to. So it's one from Dr. Laurie Santos. It's Happiness Lab. So she does actually an online course. That's Science of Wellbeing. So again, that's highly recommended. Did that a few years ago. Free online course. She does a podcast basically similar to her content in that Science of Wellbeing course. And that'd probably be the 3 main ones that I'd listen to regularly now. And then I used to listen to more sports science podcasts, so Pace Your Performance podcast. But probably not as much as what I used to, but do still tune into that occasionally as well. So that'd probably be the 4 main podcasts. But I'd say Human Lab would be the most frequent one, just with the science-based nature of it and the range of topics, physical health, mental health. But the sleep series with Matt Walker's from the one that I've listened to in the most depth most recently that I'd highly recommend people listen to.
Yeah, great. And I love the app recommendation because I often find that when podcasts are a bit longer, I come across like something I hear and I really love it. And then I forget that I've like heard it when I get to the end of the podcast and I forget to like go back. So that's actually really useful. So thanks for sharing that one.
No worries. Yeah, Snipped, it's called. I'd only discovered that a couple of months ago, but yeah, I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, awesome. And my last question for you here is, do you have a role model or someone that you look up to?
Oh, no one real specific. I mean, family's critical. So mum and dad have always been great role models. At West Coast, I was lucky to have some really good role models. So I had Glenn Stewart as my boss for a long period of time, who's the high performance manager at West Coast. He's a great mentor, great person, great communicator, great leader, great manager. So yeah, definitely would say that I look up to him. And yeah, Warren Coford was the fitness coach and then high performance manager there over a long period of time. Similar. So I was really lucky in terms of who I had mentors working at West Coast over a 15-year period. So that would definitely be two people in a work sense that I've looked up to. And yeah, just generally people that work in industries where they give to others and yeah, they're quite sacrificial in terms of what they do.
Yeah, amazing. And those seem like really great examples. And I find that it's often like the people in our lives, our personal lives that we can like look up to because we know them and we've like spent time with them. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'd love to dive into our main topic for today. So I'd love to start by asking you about like the connections between mental health and physical health. And I know there's been like a lot of growing research in this field, but there's little less known about the pathways from one to another, like mental health and physical health. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess when you talk about the mechanisms around mental health, I think you go to like hormones. So first of all, like hormones, they're chemical messengers released by either the glands or the organs into the blood, which can significantly influence mental health by regulating the acute stress response, mood, emotions, and cognitive functions. So happy to dive into that as much as you would like in terms of some of the different hormones, some of the different mechanisms. But yeah, broadly, hormones regulate functions in the body that influences long-term physical and mental health. When you have imbalances in hormones over a long period, so chronic imbalances, that can contribute to like chronic stress, which is obviously bad as compared to acute stress, which is actually adaptive and a good thing. But yeah, when you go into those chronic stress states, that can lead to mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and cognitive decline. In terms of like some of the key hormones, so that's where you start talking about like cortisol, for example, is probably the most widely known stress hormone released from the adrenal glands in the kidneys, which is one of the main hormones responsible for stress regulation. Adrenaline, so again, released from the adrenal glands, it's responsible for energy and alertness. So in short doses over small periods of time is really important, a really good thing. But if you're consistently in a really switched on state, that can become a bad thing in terms of chronic stress. Another key one's melatonin, which is obviously strongly associated with sleep-wake cycles and signaling to the body that it's time to sleep. So there's more and more research and evidence and material. So I've mentioned the Matt Walker podcast around the critical importance of sleep, in particular, like consistency of sleep and wake cycle and getting at least 7+ hours sleep per night, ideally in that 8 to 9 hours range.
Yeah.
So that's another key one. And then you have your sex hormones, so estrogen and testosterone, which are more important in terms of like mood and emotional well-being. So that's kind of a broad overview of some of the real key hormones, if you like.
Yeah. And I was hoping to find out what hormones in our body affect our physical health in terms of like when we're stressed.
Yeah. So chronic stress is actually something I've looked into in quite a bit of detail a few years ago based on my own experiences. So one of the main ones there, so when you're a chronic high stress state, so cortisol is one of the main hormones at play there, where it can translate to increased risk of heart disease. So it's associated with high blood pressure, elevated heart rate. Again, so referring back to sleep, so it can be related to insomnia, so like high levels of cortisol, where you get disrupted sleep and wake cycle, and you have this inverse relationship between cortisol and melatonin, where high levels of cortisol can like disrupt the release of melatonin, which is critical in terms of signaling that it's time to sleep. So if that's interrupted, that can really have a bad effect in terms of your sleep hygiene. Also, when you have those really high levels of cortisol, the immune system can become suppressed, where you get that increased risk of infection. Can also have a really negative effect in terms of fat storage. So where there's more fat storage around the abdomen, which is obviously really bad for your long-term health. It can also have flow-on effects in terms of digestive issues, so pain sensitivity, irritable bowel syndrome, also things like hair problems, hair loss, premature graying, and then also just physical tension. So cortisol, so chronic stress and high cortisol levels can translate to increased inflammation, increased muscle tension, even things like skin problems as well. So that's probably the main hormone that's at play in terms of like a chronic stress state. The other one is the sort of adrenaline. So that's heavily involved in terms of your acute stress response, which can be which is really important and critical in terms of like your acute stress response. But if that's consistently elevated, where you're consistently in a switched on state, again, that can translate to increased risk of heart disease, so high blood pressure, increased heart rate. Again, so linking back to sleep. So you have this state of heightened alertness with high levels of adrenaline consistently, and that translates or transfers to issues getting to sleep. So insomnia, even like issues like with frequent urge to urinate, and again, so tension headaches and issues with muscle tension with that heightened sense of alertness. And then, so moving on to, so you're more the sex hormones, obviously you can get imbalances in a chronic stress state with testosterone, so low testosterone and low estrogen levels, which can have flow-on effects in terms of reproductive health issues, including disrupted fertility and menstrual cycles. And then, obviously reduced libido and sexual dysfunction as well. So they're some of the key kind of hormones at play in a chronic stress state where you have an effect on your physical health.
So I'd love to ask you about some stress management strategies that people can use to help them manage, their mental and physical health.
Yeah. So a really useful analogy that I consistently refer to now, which I discovered a few years ago off the back of a stressful period, is the stress bucket. In particular, so managing your stress bucket. So the stress bucket represents our ability or capacity to handle and manage our own stress levels, where every stressor adds water to our stress bucket. So when I talk about stresses which fill the bucket, you can divide them into personal stresses, workplace stresses, and then that transfers to the stress bucket overflowing. When the stress bucket overflows, that's when it leads to issues like anxiety, depression, and burnout. So some examples there in terms of personal stresses, so like family issues, relationship conflict, financial pressures, health issues, sleep issues, and then you have your more like workplace issues, so high job demands and a lack of work-life balance. So all of those can fill your stress bucket, and what you're trying to prevent is your stress bucket from overflowing. So you need to have good coping mechanisms in place, which essentially like put holes in your stress bucket or release water. So if you imagine like a tap releasing water from the stress bucket to stop it from overflowing. So that's your coping strategies. So that determines whether you overflow or you maintain normal, healthy state. So in terms of some of the best coping mechanisms to manage your stress bucket, stop it from overflowing. So movement, just simple movement is one of the key ones. In particular, exercise, high intensity exercise. So short bouts, even like 10 minutes worth, 10 to 20 minutes worth of high intensity exercise in particular, that gives you a huge benefit in terms of managing your own stress levels. Gym, cardio, gym circuit sessions as well are really beneficial in that space. Another key one that we've already covered in terms of how important it is sleep hygiene, getting consistent and sleep and wake time, and then consistently getting 7 at least hours of sleep, and then ideally that 8 to 9 hours. So consistent good sleep hygiene is critical in terms of managing your stress and general positive mood and emotional regulation as well. Other ones, so breathing techniques, in particular, like extended exhale breathing as compared to inhale. So it's really good in terms of managing your stress levels. It's one of the quickest ways to calm down if you are feeling heightened. So that, for example, Huberman does talk about a number of those techniques in his podcast. So physiological sigh is one of them. So it's a couple of inhales followed by a extended exhale. But yeah, there's heaps of good meditation and mindfulness apps out there as well, which have some really good guided breathing sessions. So for example, Smiling Mind's one, which is a free app that I use quite a bit. And then Calm is another one that's really good. There's a free version of that. There's also a paid version, but yeah, highly recommended, both of those. And then in terms of stress as well, what you put into your body, so what you eat and when you eat is also really important in terms of managing stress levels. So for example, if you're eating too close to your bedtime, that can interfere with your sleep hygiene, which then has a flow-on effect in terms of your stress levels. Generally staying hydrated as well. Another one that I can learn the hard way is not having too much caffeine and being mindful of your caffeine timing. So, for example, avoiding having caffeine, like, for example, like by the time you get to mid-afternoon, ideally you've cut off your caffeine, because the half-life of caffeine's, it's individual, but it's around 6 hours. So it takes, that 6 hours to clear half of the caffeine from your system. So ideally you're having your caffeine before, let's say, 1 p.m. So it's not interfering with your ability to get to sleep. So a lot of these are kind of linked back to your sleep in terms of managing your stress, as well as movement and exercise. Some other ones, so obviously just connecting back with your friends and family is obviously a really important one in terms of managing your stress levels and talking about how you're feeling and just generally touching base with them. And probably some other ones that are a little bit more outside the box, so that I use a little bit. So ice baths and sauna I found to be really beneficial, and contrasting the two in terms of managing stress levels, in particular on the days where I'm not exercising, and combining exercise and I guess mindfulness with like yoga in particular, I found to be really beneficial. And then in terms of other avenues, so depending on the individual, like there's some really good online mental health support avenues now. So BetterHelp's one, and just getting into the routine for those that need it, like it's a brain dump, if you like, for want of a better word, routine, instead of just going, all right, that's how I'm going at the moment, and helping someone from someone external in terms of processing that. So that's a kind of overview, I guess, in terms of the stress bucket and different strategies to manage your stress bucket. And that's something I definitely reflect on consistently in terms of, all right, am I managing my own stress bucket in terms of managing my own personal health and well-being week to week?
Yeah. And you mentioned before that you recommend like short bursts of high intensity exercise. So I wanted to ask you if we could dive into how exercise influences our mental and physical health a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we start pretty simple, think of exercise as natural medicine for the brain. So
Yeah.
simplistically, it releases these mood enhancing chemicals. So it promotes the release of these mood enhancing chemicals from the brain. So serotonin is one of the key ones, and dopamine's another one, and then also endorphins, so from the central nervous system and the pituitary as well. And exercise, as we just spoke about, says the stress bucket. So it provides a routine to manage your daily stresses. And it's generally a key strategy in reducing stress and enhancing your mental well-being. And research is showing more and more it's comparable to different medications available in terms of efficacy, in terms of effect on mental health. And you get also the added benefit of physical health improvements and benefits in terms of brain function. And then, so Peter Attia, so his book that I mentioned, Outlive, one of the key points there is the critical importance of exercise in terms of proactive prevention of different health disorders and health issues, and then the beneficial effect on both lifespan and health span. So people that regularly exercise generally live longer and function in a better state compared to those that don't exercise regularly. So that's a very kind of broad overview. But in terms of like the actual mechanism behind it, the starting point of it,
Yeah.
when you start exercising, the response initially is so the heart has to pump more blood, which that enhances blood flow to both your muscles and to your brain as well. So the result of that is so more oxygen and nutrients are reaching your brain. From there, so with that effect, more neurons, so nerve cells are activated with that increased blood flow to the brain, and it activates so your neural pathways, and your neurons fire at an increased rate, and they communicate better, and they release neurotransmitters. So the neurotransmitters are what we talked about in terms of those healthy chemicals that are released from the brain and the pituitary gland, and they're essentially the fast chemical messages with short duration effect. So, for example, the serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins. And we spoke about hormones earlier. The end effect of that is the neurotransmitter release helps regulate your hormone levels. Right. So it signals to the endocrine system to adjust your hormone levels. So we spoke about cortisol and testosterone, for example. It ends up like in a net decrease in your cortisol levels, which we spoke about. It's one of the key hormones related to stress, and in particular, in a chronic stress state where your cortisol levels are at a high level, like exercise helps regulate cortisol so they're not reaching those high levels, for example.
Yeah. And like for people who know that exercise is good for you, but I know that some people struggle to get into exercise or find what works for them, but it's common knowledge that exercise is good for you. And like you said as well, it helps increase your lifespan. Do you have any strategies for people who want to integrate more exercise into their life or integrate any exercise into their life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think start small, start with creating a routine of doing something. So whether that just be starting with, 3 walks a week, for example, it doesn't take much to get a significant benefit from a physical and mental health point of view. And don't try and integrate too many new habits at a time. So, for example, try and focus on, 1 to 2 habits initially, like per month, rather than overwhelming yourself. So, for example, like when you get to New Year's resolutions, like one of the key reasons why they fail is people try and focus on too many of those at once rather than trying to gradually layer those in over time, over the course of the year. So it's probably starting with, all right, what's my ideal day and week look like from a health and well-being point of view in terms of your habits, and then reflecting on, all right, how well am I managing my own stress bucket and self-care consistently? And then, just real gradual progressions in terms of exercise initially. So in terms of the duration and the intensity, focus on routines rather than goals initially, and reflect monthly on how you're going. And yeah, it's just kind of thinking around, all right, planning, what does it look like over the course of a day and over the course of a week? So for example, like I plan out at the end of each week, what's my next week look like in terms of, my events that I've got on, my work, and when am I going to position my exercise, for example? And then, what am I planning to do at the start of each day and then throughout the day? But it's have a routine. So for example, for me, mine is, it's a start of day, it's get up, cold shower to kind of like boost alertness, early morning sunlight and movement. So take the dog for a walk. Otherwise he tells me off. And then ideally get a morning workout in to start the day. In terms of just general productivity, like set alerts in terms of your work. So like 20 minutes on, for example, and then 5 minutes off, and block it up. And I find that really helps with focus. And then you can like build in like little small bouts of stretching or micro movements, squats or push-ups during those periods where you're having a short break, which can stimulate blood flow. And it has a positive effect on your health and well-being for not doing much. And it's just incorporating like little small bouts. Or if you do like 45 minutes on, for example, it's then having a 10 to 15 minute break. It might be, all right, have a wellness walk. So you walk around the block and come back. So you get sunlight and movement. So that'd be another thing. And then importance of caffeine for mine was a key one, and just having specific timings. I set an alarm to go, all right, you're giving me a 30-minute warning around caffeine, and going, all right, that's your last caffeine dose for the day. And then, having an end of workday ritual where you're creating a barrier or signal to your body and mind that it's time to switch into personal mode rather than work mode. So having a transition activity, whether that's walk around the block, exercise, or connecting with family, friends. And then another key, real small one that's really beneficial is just having a habit of like walking post your meals. So physical and mental health, but also your metabolism. I guess probably what I should have started with is anchoring your health and well-being routines around getting you at least 7 hours of sleep and having a consistent sleep and wake routine. So it's probably start with that. And then in terms of facilitating sleep, one key thing that I've learnt over time is the importance of a wind down routine. So I used to get into the habit of working quite a lot late at night because I found I was quite productive in that time window. But I now have a wind down routine where I'm shutting off. You're activating screens at least an hour before bedtime, because I find otherwise you're pretty wired still by the time you're trying to get to sleep. And initiating like a wind down routine. So for example, hot shower, read, meditate, and then start focusing on your sleep environment, having it cool, dark, quiet, all the simple stuff that they talk about. So Matt Walker talks about these in quite a bit of detail. And then, just being mindful of things that can interfere with your sleep. So in particular, like even small doses of alcohol, not saying to people not to drinking alcohol, but just being mindful of the effect even small amounts of alcohol can have on your sleep quality. And then, caffeine we spoke about. And then, activating screens, even difficult conversations close to bedtime as well. And that can have a pretty significant negative effect.
Yeah.
So there's some. And then, weekly practices in terms of integrating into your health and wellbeing routine. Mindfulness and meditation. Couldn't recommend them more, especially as part of a wind down routine. And did mention like the contrast therapy around ice bath and sauna. Highly recommend. And probably actually one that I haven't mentioned is monitoring your sleep. So that's something I've started doing quite a bit of detail in the last year or so. But there's some really good wearables now that really help inform you around your current sleep hygiene, both how much sleep you're getting and then the consistency of your sleep and wake time. So, for example, there's tools like a Fitbit is quite effective. And then you have like Whoop and Oura Ring that are also really good options depending on what you're after, to monitor sleep and overall health and wellbeing habits.
Yeah, great. And there's so many options there and so many strategies that people can implement. So, with all of that in mind, where do we start?
Uh, where do you start? I think, well, routine and establishing what your routine is and start small, I think is the main thing. In terms of, so this is in terms of establishing your own routine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it's literally, I find actually planning and putting something in the calendar around this is what I want to do each of my health and wellbeing habits. And then you're mentally starting to commit to doing those, integrating those routines at that time. I find, planning in advance is key. And as I spoke about, I kind of have a plan for each scenario. So for me, every third and fourth week of the month, I'm on site. So I have to adjust my exercise routine a little bit around my work for those weeks. So I have a plan in terms of, all right, what am I doing those weeks compared to the weeks that I'm at home? So that's one key thing. And I'd highly recommend measuring different aspects of your health and well-being. So as I mentioned, so for example, wearables around, okay, at the moment, how many steps am I getting in per day? So you can easily do that with Fitbit, Apple Watch, Garmin. How much am I exercising at the moment compared to what I've done historically? How am I sleeping? And then I guess one kind of key thing that I've found that's really beneficial in terms of integrating health and wellbeing routines, if you have people around you that are like-minded and they're willing to join you and you have like a community based around health and wellbeing and exercise, I find that's really beneficial.
Yeah.
So for example, like combine catch-ups with friends and family, and being active. So for example, with dad, so it's often, hiking. So it's a huge one, or kayaking. With my sister, for example, that she's getting married at the end of the year. So we combine our catch ups with, gym, and then, walks/run sessions as well. And then even like former colleagues and still really good friends at West Coast. For me, it's, combining, run catch ups and then having a debrief after, having a coffee or, lunch afterwards. So it's, combining, so I guess connection and healthy habits as much as possible, I find is a really good way of integrating health and wellbeing routines.
Yeah, awesome. And for people who struggle with physical illness, some of this might not be possible. So what practices do you recommend to support their mental well-being as well?
Yeah, so probably depends on the extent of the illness and what the exact illness is and what's still possible. So, I mean, as we've spoken about, even like walking, like doing some short walks, that gives you significant benefit. Can they still swim? That's a really good one in terms of cardio. Can they do like an arm ergo session? Like, so there's definitely options still, depending on what the physical illness is. But as I've spoken about, there's some really good health and wellbeing routines that aren't exercise related as well. So, meditation and mindfulness, relaxation techniques, utilizing, contrast therapy, so ice bath, sauna, and then, focusing on sleep and connection. There's heaps of health and wellbeing aspects you can still focus on, but it doesn't take that much in terms of movement to get a benefit still, even for those with physical illnesses that are restricted. It's just figuring out, all right, what can I still do despite my limitations?
Yeah, great. And shifting like into those practices and habits a bit more, is there like one practice or habit that you have that you could recommend that works really well for your personal mental and physical health?
Um, well, for me, the most beneficial one for me is high intensity cardio. So it really
Yeah.
depends on where you're at in terms of your exercise journey. But I find personally that high intensity, short bouts of cardio, like even like 20 to 30 minutes, so intervals, they give me the most benefit in terms of my own health and well-being. I love the gym, but I've definitely gravitated more and more towards doing more cardio, and that's predominantly been related to the positive effect it has on my own mental health as much as anything, in terms of, rather than it being related to any goals that I have in place around wanting to run a certain distance or anything. It's purely, I've got into the habit of running at least 3 times a week. And I find that's the best thing in terms of managing my own stress and health and well-being. So, for example, like I divvy it up in terms of, I'll do one run that's quite short in terms of the intervals. So it might be, for example, 20 seconds jog, 20 seconds stride, so fast jog, and then 20 seconds recover. And just do that for a block of 10 minutes, have a couple of minutes of like complete rest, and then do another 10-minute block of that. Could be as simple as that. So that's one run. And then the next run, it's like longer interval kind of based session where you might run for 4 minutes, then recover for a minute, and then just do repetitions of that. For example, for me, it's up to, so 7 to 10 Ks worth of that. And then, one long run each week as well, in terms of like building endurance for me. But for me, it's cardio, and high intensity cardio is the most beneficial for me personally in terms of my own mental health and well-being, and managing my stress bucket. And probably the other one, since I've started really focusing on having a consistent sleep time and wake time, and then setting an alarm to go, all right, it's now an hour pre when I want to go to bed. It then acts as a cue for me to go, all right, I need to switch into wind down routine mode. And also the caffeine change was a huge one for me, in terms of, at the peak, I was probably having 3 to 4 coffees a day as late as 2:30, 3 o'clock. And that wasn't great in terms of my own stress and anxiety levels. And since I've made that change to going less caffeine and then cutting it off before 1 p.m., that's made a significant change for the better. And the other one is the contrast therapy, as I've spoken about. So the ice bath and sauna combo I found has been really beneficial for me. So that's probably an overview of the ones that I've found most beneficial.
Yeah, and you said like the short intensity workouts really improve your mental health. So what's going on in terms of like the mechanisms post-workout?
Yeah, so that's when we come back to the neurotransmitter release. So that's the main thing at play there. So the research suggests that you get a greater release of those feel-good chemicals, so via the neurotransmitters being released. So that's the main mechanism at play there. And I think that was one of the starting points in my own health and well-being journey, and going down this path was realizing that I needed to manage my own stress levels better, and doing quite a lot of research in this space, and finding that, all right, well, a lot of the research now is suggesting that, high intensity exercise is as effective as different medications in terms of managing mental health, even for people that are in a state where they are on the lower end in terms of their mental health continuum.
Yeah, and if you could leave us with one piece of advice for improving our mental and physical health, what would that be?
Well, for me, it was the analogy around the stress bucket, and consistently reflecting on that every day and thinking, okay, am I managing my own stress bucket effectively at the moment? What are my go-to strategies, and how am I integrating them across my day and then across the week? So that's really the way that I consistently check in on myself in terms of going, all right, well, how am I managing my own physical and mental health via the stress bucket? How effective am I at the moment? And do I need to change anything?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jarryd, for coming on the show and sharing your insights with us, and also so many strategies that we can use as well. So that's been super helpful.
No, it's been my pleasure, Joanna. Thank you.
Thank you. And for people who want to find out a bit more about you and your work, where can we go?
LinkedIn's probably the best way to reach me, I think, at the moment. I do have some plans around posting a bit more around taking some complex information around exercise and mental health and physical health, and making that simple and posting that more via different avenues, so LinkedIn and X, but that's a work in progress at the moment. So I'd suggest, LinkedIn would probably be the best way to contact me at the moment, and I can leave my contact details for email and that sort of things as well.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. If you guys missed that, don't worry. We've got all of Jarryd's details down in the description below. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.
You've been listening to the Self-Improvement Atlas, the Personal Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. For more episodes like this from 10 different life management perspectives, search LMSL on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you can get updated on everything we have to offer. We have a wide range of topics readily available for you to check out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps us grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pe.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.